Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Up in Smoke Part 5. Today we're talking about the unsolved mystery of Susan Powell. Shortly into the disappearance of Susan Powell, the police would become very suspicious of Joshua Powell, and with good reason. And it's around this time that they would take the family van and they would issue a warrant to investigate it to see if they could find anything. And what they found inside the van was very odd indeed. Before the police would do a very thorough check of the family van, they would find some very suspicious things inside the van. If you remember, they had asked Joshua when was the last time that he had spoken or seen his wife, and he would say around 12:30 that night when he would take his kids camping on Simpson Spring Road. But not only would this completely not fall in line with his story, as Susan's clothes would be still at the house. And not only that, they would find her cell phone inside the van. They would also find a bag, and inside of it would be remains of what would seem to be charred bedrock. And they would do DNA testing on the items inside this bag, but they would not find any DNA falling back to Susan. But what they would find, and police would say that whatever Joshua was using, he was trying to destroy all evidence of. Now, while the family van was impounded, Joshua would actually rent a vehicle at a car rental place, and during this time, he would become even more suspicious, as even though the car itself would not have a GPS tracker, the car rental would say that during this time of 2 days, he would drive hundreds of miles. And upon returning home, a neighbor would say that they had noticed when Joshua had gotten out of the car that his hands had showed sign of being out in the weather for a long period of time, and would say that his hands were very red and cracked, as if he had just been out in the wilderness in the snow without any gloves on for a long period of time, and would actually be seen trying to rub cream on his hands. And this would not be the only thing that police would notice about Joshua that was extremely suspicious. Shortly after Susan's disappearance, Joshua would cancel all of her chiropractor appointments and would also cancel all of his son's daycare appointments, which was really weird. The police would also learn that Joshua, before Susan's disappearance, would actually put an increase on her life insurance policy up to $1.5 million. And at the same time, after her disappearance, would liquidate all of her retirement that she had saved up over the years of working, which made police wonder, why are you doing all these things and not being more concerned about trying to find your wife? But the most alarming piece of evidence that the police would find would actually be found inside the Powell residence. And they would actually find a letter that Susan herself had written. And in this letter, she would write that in the last days of her marriage, before her disappearance, she was living in complete fear of her life, and would even use the term that if something were to happen to her, would suggest that not only would it not be an accident, but that Joshua would be solely responsible. After this, the police would quickly make Joshua a key person of interest, and to follow up with his story, they would actually travel over to Simpson Spring Road to see exactly where Joshua and his sons had been camping. And when they went to that particular area, big shock, they would find no evidence that anyone had been camping there anytime soon. Shortly after this, the police would actually question 4-year-old Charles Powell about the night in question. and would ask Charles if they had actually went camping that night. And Charles would tell the police that they indeed had went camping with their father. But was even more unsettling is Charles would tell the police that their mother had been in fact with them when they went camping, but however she did not return with them on the way back home, which would give the police more reason to ask more questions. The police knew that Joshua's story just had no truth to it whatsoever, so it's around this time that they would try to investigate the phone that they had found in the family van that had belonged to Susan. And surprisingly, the SIM card had been removed. So the police would ask if Joshua didn't mind turning in his phone to do some investigating on that. And big surprise again, that SIM card had also been removed, which made police speculate, what is it that Joshua does not want to see, not only on his wife's phone, but his own. It's also around this time that Joshua would start evading police and would stop being as cooperative as he was before. And it's shortly after this that he would actually hire a lawyer. But also at the same time, other people began speaking up to the police, giving them more alarming stories that would make him more suspicious. In particular, his work colleagues. Some colleagues had actually told the police that on one occasion when they were having lunch, Joshua would just randomly tell his colleagues, "I found the perfect way to bury a dead body." Most of the colleagues would say they just kind of ignored it, and instead of just Joshua just going to a different topic, he would go into detail about how hiding a dead body in a mine shaft in the desert would be the best way to discard of a dead body, which, considering Susan's disappearance, was even more alarming. But the most alarming thing that could have been spoken to the police, or that the police would find out about, would actually come from the testimony of 2-year-old Braden Powell. As several weeks after the investigation, Braden would actually be in the presence of his babysitters, and Braden would actually tell the babysitter that his mother was dead. And that was probably the most heartbreaking thing coming from a 2-year-old. But even more disturbing is Braden would actually draw a van, and the babysitter would ask, well, who's in the van? And Braden would say himself, his brother Charles, and his father. And the babysitter would ask, well, where's your mom? To which Braden would respond, she's in the trunk of the car. By January of 2010, Joshua would actually take his 2 sons up and leave and move in with his father in Washington, which was about 900 miles away. And not only during this time was Joshua, Charles, and Braden living with Stephen, but around the same time, Joshua's brother and his sister Alina would also be living with Stephen. But it's also around this time that the police would find something that would completely shake this whole investigation upside down.